regularly scheduled meeting of the Placerville City Council. We're happy you've joined us tonight. And with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order and invite you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Yule, will you start us off in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Good evening, Mrs. Zito. May we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Borelli.
Here.
Councilmember Hagan.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mattson.
Here.
Councilmember Patton.
Here.
Councilmember Wilkins.
Here. Thank you. With that, we move on to item 3, which are announcements and presentations to the public. And first of all, I would like to wish everyone a very happy new year. May it be a good year for all of you. And I thank you for joining us tonight, those of you in the audience, those of you on the audience at home. And thank you for our staff. On Tuesdays, you have a very, very long day, and council adds a lot to it, and we appreciate you being here. And I'd also like to welcome our new council members, Councilmember Patton and Councilmember Wilkins. Happy to have you up here with us tonight. And at their last meeting when they were sworn in, I didn't give them the opportunity to say a few words, and so I'd like to do that at this time. And let's start with you, Councilwoman Patton.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Mattson, and I'm excited to join the council, the existing council, and I'd like to thank the staff for their help in getting me up to speed on some of the things that we're facing right now. I wanted to thank when we were sworn in, Mayor Mark Acuna. He was a planning commissioner when I was a planning commissioner, and I truly appreciated his grace and his gentle way with how he approached different items with the public, and I would hope to have been able to learn from him. And the other person that I wish to thank was Kathy Lishman and her support over the many, many years that she has served this community. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you.
Well, we're glad you're here. Councilwoman Wilkins.
I'd also like to thank staff for helping bring me up to speed, and the other council members, and Vice Mayor Mattson for getting me to my first meeting and making me feel very comfortable, and everybody else who supported our city, and thank you.
Well, we're glad you're here too. Wonderful. And I do have a few announcements tonight. On a very sad note, there was a tragedy in our community a week ago on New Year's Eve, and a member of our community, Dan Ferrier, was killed in Old Town Sacramento. He was working at a bar at a security detail as a security guard, and things got out of hand, and he stepped in to do the right thing, and he was shot along with a bartender. And this young man was beloved by our community, and yesterday there was a celebration of his life, and over 400 people poured out to celebrate the good he had done to our community. So my heart goes out to his family in this senseless tragedy. And I'd also like to acknowledge our merchants in our community for rallying around the family. They came into town, and Cumbelix donated suits for the family for the celebration of life, and our merchants donated items to make their time here more comfortable in this horrible time. And I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude for what an amazing community we have that comes together in good times and in bad. So we will certainly miss Daniel. So wanted to think of him tonight. And on a happier note, thinking about how wonderful our community is, it is all too easy to complain about what we don't like. And so had a crazy idea, and I actually got this idea from my mom, who sent this over. There's a small town in Saratoga in the Bay Area that is doing this program, and Dennis and I got together and thought, we need to implement this for Valentine's Day. So last week we approached the Downtown Association, and just like our community said, they said, love the idea, let's do it. So wanted to let you know that starting right now, love is in the air in Placerville, and it's a way to support our community, to support our merchants. And so now through Valentine's Day at participating merchants, you will see these signs, and they're called Love Notes to Our Community. And each participating store will have 4 of these heart designs. Invite you to come in and write a love note to your community. It's free. It's free to the merchants. It's free to the community. And you can write letters of appreciation for maybe the people that water the flower baskets, for a store that you particularly love, for service you got at lunch that day that made your life a little better, to your special someone, anything that you appreciate about this town or the people in it. And then, from February 1st to February 14th, the stores will be placing these love notes downtown, and love will be in there in Placerville. So I invite you to take part in this, and I think I applaud the Downtown Association for jumping on our crazy idea and following through with it. So we do have an amazing community.
So when this
Yes.
is just for downtown?
It's just for downtown because it was such a short amount of time to ramp this up. Next year, if people love it, I can see doing it on Broadway, downtown, and Placerville Drive. There just wasn't the time to implement all of that this year. So thanks for asking. All right. So with that, we moved on to item 4, closed session report. Mr. Driscoll.
Thank you. Tonight in closed session, the council did not take reportable action except for the item on the Zemwoski claim, which the council, all members present, unanimously denied.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Driscoll. And with that, we move to the adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda?
No.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Approve, I move for
Second.
approval.
It's been moved by Councilmember Borelli and seconded by Hagan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Agenda is adopted. With that, we move on to ceremonial matters, item 6.1. And at this time, I will adjourn the meeting sine die and turn the meeting over to our city manager, Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Mattson. At this time, the point of this agenda item is to, oh, thank you. I like that. To appoint a new mayor for the coming year. The next item is for the vice mayor. So at this time, as is the custom, I will take nominations for appointment of mayor, and I need a motion and a second for mayor position.
Move,
I would like to
Wendy.
move-
Go ahead.
I would like to move that Wendy Mattson be elected mayor.
Okay,
Second.
thank you.
I
Any
guess I'm
other-
going to have to get used to this, right?
Any other comments or nominations? Seeing none, we will, do we need to do a roll call vote? Thank you. Close nominations, and we'll ask the city clerk to do a roll call.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Councilmember Hagan?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mattson?
With gratitude, aye.
Councilmember Patton?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins?
Aye.
And it is unanimous. Thank you.
What a surprise, huh?
And with that, I will turn the time back over to Mayor Mattson.
Well, I'm greatly honored. Thank you so incredibly much. It's a privilege to serve the city. And with that, I'd like to call for nominations for the vice mayor.
I'd like to nominate Carl Hagan as vice mayor.
I'll second that. Okay, all those in favor? Sorry. Are there any other additional nominations? I'm sorry. No, seeing none. All those, roll call, I guess, on that. Ms. Zito?
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Councilmember Hagan? Mayor Mattson?
Aye.
Councilmember Patton?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins?
Aye.
Well, congratulations, Vice Mayor Hagan. Wonderful. All right.
Thank you.
And with that, we move on to something that happens every year here in the city of Placerville. It's a lovely event. And I have a proclamation declaring a season for nonviolence. And is Mr. Martin in the audience tonight? Do we have a representative? No? All right. Okay. Well, with that, I won't read the whole thing since we don't have someone in attendance to accept it. But it's a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Placerville declaring January 30th, 2013 to April 4th, 2013, a season for nonviolence in the City of Placerville. And, all right. All right, so with that, we will move on to public comment. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda. And state law prohibits the council from acting or commenting on items not listed on the agenda. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And actually, first, before we do oral communication, do we have any written communication?
No additional written communication,
All right,
Mayor.
thank you, Mr. Morris. At this point, we invite anyone to come to the podium that would like to speak. Please state your name for the record. And good evening.
Good evening, new city council.
Good evening.
Michael Drobish, Placerville. Congratulations first. And I just wanted to thank the city clerk. My modem crashed, couldn't get online, couldn't read the agenda. So she was kind enough to let me look at the binder, and all was good. So just wanted to pass along thanks. And I still haven't figured out how to get to the viewing, the live stream viewing of the council. So if somebody knows the tricks, talk to me, please. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Drobish. All right. Is there anyone else wishing to address the council? No? With that, we will close public comment and bring it back to the consent calendar. And all matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion by roll call unless any member of the council wishes to remove an item for discussion. Is there any member of the council wishing to remove a consent calendar item? No? All right. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on any item under the consent calendar? No? All right. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for a motion.
Move consent.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those actually, we have a roll call vote. Ms. Zito.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hagan?
Aye.
Mayor Mattson?
Aye?
Councilmember Patton?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins?
Aye.
Good. All right. And next, we move on to our ordinances. And before we do that, I'd like to acknowledge our new supervisor that just walked in. Supervisor, we are, I'm sorry, I was looking at Brian Briggs. We are delighted to have you representing the city of Placerville, and thank you for coming tonight. All right. All right. And with that, we move on to item 9.1, a first reading of an ordinance amending City Municipal Code 1-14-3. Mr. Morris, would you like to talk about this item?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item is being proposed for several years now. I've only been here a couple of years, but I know for some time, looking back at the ordinance, our regularly scheduled council meetings are scheduled for the second and fourth Tuesday at 7 p.m. And this is done by ordinance, as noted in the title to this item. Many times throughout the year, you have noted that those that have been on the council, and even those that haven't, many times our council meetings will go late into the evening if we have a large agenda. I've been here 11, 12 o'clock at night. And for that reason, it's proposed that we consider moving the meeting time up 1 hour to 6 p.m., which doesn't make the meeting any shorter, but it perhaps would make it that we don't get out quite as late at night. And from my experience in this business, the later the night goes, the more difficult the items become and do not get the proper discussion as we get more tired and fatigued going through a long meeting. And for that reason, it's being proposed that the meeting time be changed to 6 o'clock. Also need to note that for closed sessions, that would then mean normally we meet either a half hour or an hour before, so it'd be required for closed sessions we would either be meeting at 5 or 5:30, depending on the length of the closed session. I did discuss this with Mayor Mattson, and in fact, she proposed that it's something we consider as well as the former Mayor Mark Acuna mentioned it to me also. So we are proposing this as staff to the council to consider. It's also available for you to introduce the ordinance tonight to get this started. We would then bring it back at your next meeting for adoption, and then the ordinance takes effect 30 days from that. So even with starting the process tonight, we wouldn't actually change the meeting time till probably the first meeting in March. So
All right.
with that, I'll turn it
Got a
over to
question procedurally.
You bet.
Occasionally, we've had closed sessions that have gone an hour and a half, so we started pretty early because we have a bit of labor negotiations and/or several cases. is it or could it be appropriate, would it be appropriate if we were into a closed session for an hour and we came back and then adjourned before the council reports at the end of the meeting and go back into closed session?
Yes, that is appropriate. You can
Okay.
do that if necessary. Yes.
Does any other council member have a question about this item?
I actually have one.
Yes.
So would it be possible when the Planning Commission used to have a time, a later night time, they didn't end the meetings, but they wouldn't introduce any new agenda items after a certain point in time so that the meetings don't drag on until midnight, 1 o'clock. So is that a possibility here with this, that we could adopt an end time for new agenda items?
Yes, I have seen that done from time to time. You have to know that from time to time you will have an agenda item that you may be late on, you realize you have to act on it.
Right.
At that time, you have to extend the meeting by motion to allow that new item to be addressed after that time period has come. So, but that is something that you could do.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Morris? All right, with that, we'll open public comment. Is there any member of the public that would wish to comment on this item? Good evening, Ms. Rodman.
Good evening, Mayor. Sue Rodman, a Placerville City resident. My main concern for moving the time forward an hour is that people who come to the meeting, we finally are getting people coming to the city council meetings. And if you move it forward an hour, how many people will find that very difficult to make the transition from work to come to the meeting?
All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to comment on this item? Hello again, Mr. Drobish.
Good evening. I love this idea. 6 o'clock is great. And I suppose if somebody really needed to speak to an item that might be earlier in the agenda, they would just call City Hall and say, could you adjust the agenda and move that item to the
We'll
later
look
in the meeting?
We'll get that answered.
Okay.
Question.
And then I don't know if you do run late and have to cancel the meeting or postpone it, would you, since consent calendar items are so important, an item that might get pulled, would you consider moving pulled items back towards the beginning of the meeting?
All right. Thank you very much. Any other question or any other comment? All right, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion and direction. Is there, let's see, let's start with you, Councilmember Patton. Do you have any other additional comments on this item?
I'm all in favor of changing the schedule to an hour earlier, but like I said before, I like the idea of not introducing new agenda items after 10:30 at night. There's no good can come of decisions that are made after 11 o'clock at night.
So you would want to add after 10:30?
I would like to have that in here, whatever time the other council members, or if staff has some comments on the time.
Okay.
Just so that it doesn't drag on from 6 o'clock now until 1 or 2
Right.
o'clock in the morning.
All right. Do you have some direction on that, Mr. Morris, Mr. Driscoll?
Well, what Mr. Driscoll is recommending, that we not actually put it in the ordinance, but we
Okay.
have it as a council policy, that we do not accept any new items after, or introduce any new items after 10:30 at night, and you can do it that way.
And a policy carries the same weight as if it was in the ordinance?
Not
No.
quite as
No, but-
heavy, no, it's not.
But we can-
But you can follow that. We could add it to your council member handbook that you've adopted and
Okay.
adopt that as a rule that you follow.
And
But-
could it be printed on the agendas so that
Sure.
everyone in the public knows that we're starting at 6 and as of 10:30, no additional agenda items will be?
Yes, that could be done.
That makes sense. All right. Thank you.
I
Councilmember
also,
Burley.
I am in favor of changing the time to 6 o'clock. I think that's kind of an empty hour between
Yeah.
6 and 7, and I quite frankly, I understand Ms. Rodman's concerns, but I really think the majority of people, if they can make 7 o'clock, they can make 6. I
And it-
really feel that way. So.
And it's only twice a month.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. Councilmember Wilkins.
I think it's a good idea. I think that the hours saved on the back end is more valuable than the 6 to 7 hours. So I'm
Okay.
in favor.
Great. Vice Mayor Hagan.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, except, and one of the things about if someone really does have something to say, there are procedures suggested in the staff report where they could contact the city clerk and ask that something be delayed for an hour. And I would say not to exceed an hour, because if they can't get here by 7, if they're going to be an hour late, okay, but they can always write a letter to the council. They can always, we can always take written correspondence on any item. Also, this agenda goes out at least 5 days in advance. It's typically posted on the internet 5 days in advance. So if you really do have detailed questions you need answered, and that's the same with consent, by the way, Ms. Veerkamp. If you have a question on consent, you can go directly to staff and get an answer, or you can ask one of the city council members to respond to a question or respond to a concern. And we have the authority to pull an item if we feel it's necessary or if we can't answer those questions. So there are more than one way to make your voices heard. So I think procedurally this is a good idea.
And I'll piggyback on that. If anyone has a concern and needs an agenda item moved around for their personal timing, they can contact any of us and we can amend the agenda to change things around. So, and we're always open to serving you appropriately. And I also like the idea, especially in terms of our staff. They get done at work at 5:30 and expecting them to wait till 7 to start a council meeting. That's just a really, really long day to have to get up and start work early the morning the next day. So certainly want to honor and value their time. So with that, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. To, let's see,
Introduce.
to introduce the ordinance of the City of Placerville amending Section 1-14-3A, setting the time for the city council meetings, and waive the first reading of said ordinance.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I think the action should reflect that the council member introduced the ordinance and moved to waive the reading of the ordinance.
Thank you. All right.
So moved.
That's
So
what I
moved.
thought- that's what I
Thank
thought
you
she
for the
said.
clarification.
I did say that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
So
All
how
right.
does that affect since that ending time isn't on this ordinance? That's just going to be a policy that have to be voted on also?
We will talk about that and bring that back as a policy, so it can.
When it comes back to council.
This is going to come back for a second reading.
Right. Okay.
We'll work on that.
Perfect. All right, thank you. With that, we'll move on to item 10, which is a public hearing, and regarding the conditional use permit 20-12-3 of the Mercy Way Rescue Church. And Mr. Webb, good evening.
Good evening, thank you. City Council, Madam Mayor. Yes, the item before you this evening is a conditional use permit request from Mercy Way Rescue Church. It is a conditional use permit, or what I'll refer to as a CUP throughout, in short, to operate a mission and a church oriented to the homeless and other disadvantaged components of the populace of the community. The facility would also serve as a check-in and shuttle bus stop location for the interfaith rotating winter shelter that operates generally from November through March, which provides winter shelter facilities for homeless people in the community at various church sites within the county. The proposal is that an existing building that's approximately 970 square feet located at 1750 Broadway, which is immediately adjacent to Tijuana Taqueria to one side, vacant property to the other side. The proposed use is in an area on Broadway that is located adjacent to other services that provide various services to the disadvantaged populations in the city, including the Community Resource Center, or CRC, the Upper Room, which provides meal services in the community, as well as the Hangtown Haven, which is a temporary homeless camp that is established just to the west of this proposed site, also on Broadway, which is operating under a temporary use permit authorized by the City Council to a maximum extent of November of 2013. The Mercy Way proposed use, again, is a Christian-based church worship offering services at this time of twice a week, but also includes other services that you would normally associate with the church, including Bible study. It also provides counseling services for folks. The shuttle bus stop, again, would operate November through March, and provides for shuttle bus services from approximately 12 to 15 patrons at a time to take them to the shelter facilities. The church services are proposed on Wednesdays and Sundays from 5:30 to 6, again for approximately 12 to 15 parishioners. The current building includes an open floor plan. Again, it's about 970 square feet in total size. It's a fairly small facility. Has a single restroom in it. The proposed floor plan would divide the space into a sanctuary room and add a storage room with shelves and counter with sink. The shuttle bus service that is provided, the Mercy Way facility would basically act as a check-in facility, but also a storage facility for the belongings of those who utilize the winter shelter at the other church locations. Because the rotating shelter doesn't allow for a large amount of personal belongings with the people who come there. So it would act as a storage facility for those belongings, a check-in facility, a place to board the shuttle bus that then takes folks to the shelter. The shuttle bus times, again, transports between 9 and 15 shelter residents a day, just depending upon the day. Would leave the site at 6:30 p.m. And return at 8:30 a.m. And then the shuttle bus would use the area, the existing paved area, which is on the west end of the site, for its maneuvering and stopping on the site. The analysis that we presented in the staff report, I know is rather lengthy. I won't go into it in great detail, but I do want to hit on some of the highlights of the analysis. Starting with the general plan and zoning land use consistencies. The general plan land use designation of the site is highway commercial designation, and which allows for a wide range of uses really oriented and intended towards the traveling public. There are some land use policies as well in the general plan that call out specifically towards institutional uses, and those are enumerated on page 3 of the staff report. But a couple in particular are Goal E under the land use element, and that is to promote the development of institutional uses that are conveniently located and compatible with surrounding areas. And then Policy 1 within that same section that reads, the city shall encourage new institutional uses to locate near similar existing uses. The zoning consistency of the site, the zoning designation is highway commercial, and that provides for a wide range of commercial uses, including restaurants, hotels, retail sales and services, restaurants, entertainment establishments, among others. As with all of the zoning districts, almost all of the zoning districts within the city, churches are a conditionally permitted use, meaning they're not a use that's permitted by right, but they're a use that can be considered by the city via issuance of a conditional use permit. The conditional use permit process is one that the city takes into account. In the city purview is that the Planning Commission has the kind of first order of review for use permits under most circumstances, unless a decision of the Planning Commission is appealed to the City Council. There's also another instance, as is the case here, where there's a tie vote. And I'll get into the more of the specifics of that in a moment. But the result of this application coming forward to the Planning Commission did result in a 2-to-2 or split vote, what we call. Legally speaking, that is a no decision. which is a default denial of the application. So it wasn't a denial by way of a majority vote in the traditional sense, but it is a denial in the legal sense. Based on the bylaws of the Planning Commission, the matter, when there's a split vote like that, automatically is brought forward to the City Council in order to render a final decision on the matter. And that's the case here tonight. And that's what brings this before you tonight for your consideration. In considering the CUP application, the City Council, for church facilities in particular, must take into account a federal act that's referred to as the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, and that was adopted in 2000. And it, again, is outlined in the staff report in more detail on page 5, but it basically enumerates the terms upon which churches are to be reviewed, and basically that they be reviewed on equal terms to other uses, and as non-religious facilities would be reviewed, in that the local government in this case would not impose or implement a land use regulation in a manner that imposes a substantial burden on the religious exercise of the religious assembly or institution. The city is not barred, that said, from imposing reasonable conditions, as would normally be the case with the conditional use permit review, to ensure that the land use is compatible, and that nor is the city barred from imposing conditions that would otherwise be imposed on other similarly situated uses, as long as the conditions don't infringe significantly on the church's ability to exercise its religious freedoms. The Planning Commission hearing on the matter, the Planning Commission deliberated the application at a public hearing on December 4th. And the hearing focused largely, I think, on the Commission's desire to have a better understanding of the scope of the use. And many of their questions really were focused on gaining that clearer understanding from the applicant. Several questions were posed to seek that greater level of clarity, and several concerns and comments were raised by the commissioners during the hearing. Some of those highlighted include a concern for lack of pedestrian sidewalks and lighting to and from the site, especially for use that caters specifically to a population that primarily walks to the facility. One of the notes that the applicant made in response to that, and which we've highlighted in the report, is that clients utilizing the Mercy Way facility are already in large part using other facilities that are nearby, utilizing the upper room, the Community Resource Center, for example, and therefore not necessarily increasing the levels of pedestrian traffic in the area. That was one of the comments from the applicant. However, staff will also note that while it may not necessarily be increasing the levels of people in the area that are already utilizing other facilities, we do think it would increase the frequency of walking trips up and down Broadway that may not otherwise occur. There was a general concern, I think, raised by the Planning Commission that of how much of the facility is a church use versus that of more of a shelter use, either a day shelter or even a nighttime shelter. So that question certainly was raised as well. Concern about the possibility and potential for registered sex offenders, particularly in light of the proximity of the facility to nearby schools and parks. And we provided, I think, some clarification on that matter in the report as well. In general, I think these concerns and questions that were raised by the Commission, I think, were not being raised in a way to suggest that the use is not necessarily compatible or appropriate or inappropriate, but to get at further information about exactly what is the use, what are the hours, what are the services provided. Ultimately, a motion was made and seconded to deny the CUP, but the motion was withdrawn. And then another motion was made to approve the conditional use permit with provisions that would allow for a period of review of 6 months, that the operating hours for the facility be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., with particular note about the concern for pedestrian travel in the area. And a number of other provisions that, again, are enumerated in the staff report, but would really, kind of hone in on some of the concerns that the Planning Commission had raised with the use. But that motion ultimately resulted in a 2-2 tie vote, which again is the no action and therefore default denial. And that brings the matter before the council tonight. After the Planning Commission hearing, staff requested that the applicant provide more detail in order to ultimately provide the City Council and the community with additional information about what the use really entails. A letter was provided by the applicant. It's attached to the staff report that enumerates, I think, in more detail the proposed uses. Staff's review of the proposal on the whole, and particularly taking into account the additional information that was presented by the applicant, is that services that are provided by modern churches, I think in large part seem to be kind of ever expanding in their scope to include not only traditional church services for worship, but also do typically include Bible studies, life skills classes, counseling, and social support networks. Those are fairly traditional, in addition to the traditional worship services. We do typically find those with church operations. And while the Upper Broadway area may not necessarily be a permanent location for homeless services, the area is home to many of those services today, again, with the facilities that I discussed previously. The proposed church with the target population really is situated, we think, to that population base that they're serving. Is within close proximity to those uses where they are already attending for other services being provided, including meals and facilities at the CRC. The expansion of the services in this area to include a church facility, staff believes, would ultimately help to assist individuals and families who are really seeking to, either get out of homelessness or, improve upon their lives. It provide for, we think, a more well-rounded range of services in the area. The letters and comments that we've received in response to the public hearings, we have received some letters of concern and some letters with questions about the proposed use, include questions about noise, about impacts and potential impacts to the area by increasing homeless services in the area and the ability to lease space. There also have been letters of support for the proposed use as well, enumerating again some of the positive attributes that a church could bring to the area. Staff believes ultimately that I think the proposed conditions that are enumerated in the staff report, with those, that adequate measures can be put in place to ensure that the use is one that's compatible and not detrimental to the surroundings. Some of the key conditions are summarized in the body of the staff report. And many of them focus on things like occupancy limitations. Again, in this case, the proposal is to limit the occupancy to a maximum of 20 in the building, and that's primarily due to the required parking ratios for church uses, as we would require of other churches. We require, per the zoning ordinance, 1 parking space for every 4 seats in an assembly use. with provision of 5 parking spaces in addition to the shuttle bus drop-off area. That equates to the 20 occupants of the building. While technically under the building code, the building may be able to accommodate a greater occupancy, perhaps up to 49, without major modifications. The other factor at hand, I think, with that proposed condition is that conditional use permits run with the land. Even if the use and the tenant changes, if it's a substantially similar tenant that moves into a facility under a use permit and it hasn't ceased operation as that use for a period of more than 6 months, the CUP remains in place on the property. With some of the activity here really being catering more towards the population that doesn't drive to the facility, the question comes up about, well, why limit the occupancy based on parking? Well, over time, again, the conditional use permit runs with the land. This would ensure that the adequate parking levels are maintained over time as tenants may change under the same use permit. There's also a condition that is proposed that would allow for review of the conditional use permit by the Planning Commission after a period of what's proposed in the staff report of 1 year. This is in large part to provide a check to ensure that the applicant has complied with the conditions. And moreover, in this particular case, we have a situation where the use really has begun operating on the site without benefit of a use permit and without benefit of the required permits, building permits to change the occupancy of the use. In light of that, there's a number of conditions that require timely processing of those applications by the applicant, timely performance by the applicant on a number of improvements to the property and to the building, including submittal of site plan to show parking lot striping and to install that said striping to the city's standards and satisfaction, but also the building itself. We believe that the review by the Planning Commission would provide a check to ensure that compliance with the provisions of that CUP. Another condition that I'll highlight is that the Planning Commission, at the Planning Commission hearing, there was a question about whether the intended church would operate as a shelter facility and provide overnight accommodations for those in any capacity. This is an issue where there's been some clarification needed, and still may be some clarification in order tonight. The applicant stated at the Planning Commission hearing that they did not intend to be a shelter facility, and are first and foremost a church. However, in a recent letter from the applicant, they have stated a desire to have the ability to provide for shelter services in various circumstances. And so the current language in the condition reflects the condition that the facility not be utilized for sleeping or overnight accommodations. And so that may warrant some further discussion this evening with the applicant. Lastly, I'll state that there is proposed in the staff report a limitation on the hours of operation from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. With a provision that the hours may be extended during daylight savings time. And this is primarily because of concerns that staff had raised about the operation, again, catering primarily to the walking patrons who walk to the facility, and the lack of sidewalks and pedestrian lighting in the area. And that's again the key interest at hand with the suggestion that the hours be restricted, based on further analysis and further analysis of various case law regarding the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act with other church cases, Staff does have, some potential concern with that proposed condition in terms of its limitations. That may also warrant some additional discussion tonight to suggest that, perhaps a bit more flexibility may be needed there. In closing, I think staff believes that on the whole, this is a use that would be, a positive addition to the community. It would be a use that would provide valuable services, particularly to the homeless and population in the community. It's a use that we believe, with appropriate monitoring and appropriate conditions, can be compatible with the neighborhood and not be a detriment to the neighborhood, but be, again, a positive addition. With that, I'll conclude my remarks. Ultimately, staff does recommend approval of the conditional use permit based on the findings and conditions that are contained in the report, and that there may be a few areas of further discussion and council questions, of course, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Webb, for your very, very thorough analysis of this issue. And at this point, we're going to take council questions. So, Councilmember Wilkins, we'll start with you. And do you have any questions for Mr. Webb? I don't have any questions. At this time, all right. Vice Mayor Hagan? None? Councilmember Borelli?
Not at this time.
Okay. And Councilmember Patton?
Not now.
Not now, okay. I do have one question for you, Mike. Item 13 in the CUP states that the applicant shall take appropriate measures to prevent loitering in the parking lot at all times. That's kind of nebulous. What does that mean? What kinds of measures would be normally required for that kind of?
I think you're right in the sense that it is a bit nebulous. It's an issue and a concern that was raised at the Planning Commission level. That again, the concern being that of is this really a day use shelter, or is it a church that maybe on a more ancillary level provide shelter services? So. The provision here, I think, is just to ensure active monitoring by the tenant, by the applicant, to keep the facility, keep the front of the facility, the parking lot spaces clear, to keep the facility, just in good order. I think it's nothing really beyond that. So.
All right. And I had one more question. What was the use before Mercy Way Rescue started operating in this building? And are there change of use requirements that we would ask any other applicant to meet?
The use immediately preceding Mercy Way was for storage use by the Tijuana Taqueria restaurant. And preceding that use was a Greyhound bus depot. Those are the only two uses that staff is aware of, that we have records for. And so, the original use as a Greyhound bus depot, probably similar intensity of use to in terms of traffic, and perhaps less so with the proposed use, even in terms of traffic and certainly bus stops. To what's proposed today. But with the Tijuana Taqueria use of the facility as storage, it was obviously a very light use of the facility. There are very few people going in and out of the facility, very few pedestrians and traffic going in and out of the facility from the public standpoint, for sure. So really, so I think, one could couch that when reviewed upon the original use of the facility and as a Greyhound bus, it's probably similar in its scope, but compared with the immediately preceding use of storage by Tijuana Taqueria, it's certainly an increase in the use of the intensity of the use of the facility.
So does that trigger additional requirements as far as upgrades on the change of use?
Right. If there is provisions in the zoning that would allow the city to trigger a site plan review if there is a change in use that alters significantly or increases significantly the intensity of the use. The more typical types of triggers for site plan review that we come across are additions to buildings, physical additions, expansions of buildings. There's a threshold of 1,000 square feet or more of addition, for example. In those cases, they absolutely trigger site plan review. And staff believe that with this particular case, that I think the level of intensity increase certainly was such that it would trigger and warrant reviewing things such as that would be, I guess, commensurate with the change in use, such as ensuring that a garbage enclosure be provided where there isn't one today, that parking lot striping plan be developed and implemented. But I think if the council wished to explore further site improvements, it may be a topic of further discussion.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Webb. And at this point, I'd like to invite the applicant up to the podium if he'd like to say a few words, and the council may have questions for you. So please state your name and welcome tonight.
My name is Frank Gates. Madam Mayor, council members, thanks for hearing us and having us here. First and foremost, we desire to be good neighbors. In 2007, we started dealing with the homeless and ministering to people in the homeless community. And I think since 2007, the amount of work that's been done in that community is just absolutely amazing. Just all the churches I've seen come together, working as one. So it's really our intent with this church to take what we've done over the last several years and from my perspective, bring Jesus into it, to bring faith and bring some sort of hope. So that we are primarily a church. And there's some confusion on my part because, to me, the bus terminal is what a church does. There's a Hebrew word abad, and it's translated as worship in the Bible. But it means to serve. It means Isaiah 58 when it says, bring the poor wanderer into your home. Feed the hungry. Clothe the naked. Welcome the stranger. So this word abad is what we do. That is our worship service. So as well as singing and preaching and Bible studies and counseling, we have an even more traditional church service, which is actually serving the poor and the least of these. And I think that's really what we want to do. We just want to be good neighbors. We love the homeless community. We love the impoverished in our community, the disenfranchised. And we want to bring them hope. We want to recognize their humanity. And we want to bring that hope and love into their lives.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member of the council have a question for Pastor Gates? Vice Mayor Hagan.
Yeah, your application indicates that takes some pretty strong positions on things other than just the service itself, the short services you provide in a couple of days. And I'm familiar with the nomadic shelters. I'm familiar with the homeless issue in this town. I've served at the shelters overnight where you used to work, or maybe you still work at Placerville Community Church. I've been overnight there and welcomed them and gone on the buses with them and so forth, driven the old vans before you were around. But there's some questions that you address about fees and exemptions from fees and process. And I guess that's one of the things, and maybe that was in Michael Parr's application.
I think that's going to be a
comments.
Michael Parr question.
Okay. And so is he the applicant or are you? I guess the applicant was asked to speak tonight.
Right. Well, I think what happened was we there's a $700 fee, I believe, for operating without the conditional use permit.
No, that's the normal conditional use permit fee.
Right. So we were asking that the extra be waived for whatever it was we were being charged for operating without the use permit.
Okay.
That's the only fee waiving that I know of.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? All right. All right. All right. Thank you, Pastor Gates. All right. Could we turn the air conditioner down? It's freezing in here. Thank you. All right. You're welcome. I'm cold too. Thank you, Steve. Yeah. Yeah. It's usually the hot seat, not the cold seat. All right. At this point, we'd like to open the public hearing on this item and invite any member of the public to speak. Good evening. Please state your name.
I'm Dr. Mary Maga. I'm former pastor of the Foothills United Methodist Church in Rescue, and I am the current pastor of the Wednesday night services. Pastor Gates is the pastor of the Sunday night services, and I offer a Bible study from 4:45 till 5:30 on Wednesday nights, and a healing and prayer service from 5:30 till just after 6. And I have been in ministry for 30 years in Europe, on the East Coast, in the inner city, and I have never been so passionate about a ministry in my life. Jesus said when he sent the disciples out into the world, cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the leper, and cast out demons. Truly, this church is filled with the folks that have fallen through the cracks of so many other churches. When we talk about demon-possessed, we have people who actually are demon-possessed in our churches. When we talk about lepers, people who are outcast, who really aren't welcome because of how they talk or how they look or even how they smell, those are our congregants. When we talk about people who are so kicked to the curb by life that their hope has really made them dead, that's our congregation. And the truth of the matter is, folks, that when I was pastor of the Methodist Church, these people, some of whom are here tonight, would actually not have been welcome in my church. And let me tell you why. Because I needed parents with children to feel safe and comfortable in my churches. And some of the folks that I'm ministering to now would have been alienating to those people. And yet, nobody in this community is more in need of the hope of the resurrected Christ than these folks are. And that's what we're offering in this church. I know there's been some confusion about overnight shelter. We don't want to shelter people overnight at our church. I do need the option, however, as the days get longer, to offer additional praise and prayer and counseling and Bible study services up till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I've never had the key to a church that I wasn't allowed to use after a certain time of the evening, and so I would ask that that condition be waived. The other thing I will say is that I know that, like the Apostle Peter, our enthusiasm ran ahead of our maybe gifts at some point, and we were offering worship services before we had approval, and I want to apologize for that. I saw the need, and we had a key, and I rushed in, and I started doing it, so that's my bad. But I want to say that already I've had up to 30 people at my Bible studies and worship services, so I don't, which 10 do I tell not to come in because we don't have sufficient parking for those people who are, after all, pedestrians who've come in? I would absolutely, under all circumstances, make sure that we kept to the fire marshal's 49. There's no question about that. But I would ask that that 20 be waived because given our population, it doesn't make sense. And the final thing that I want to say is that I have found in these people a hunger for a new life that I have found in no other church that I've ever served. I have people sitting in the front row as I preach or as I teach, literally leaning into the love and the acceptance and the hope that's being offered. And I know for a fact that this is going to make, not just for better people and not just for better disciples, but for better citizens of the city of Placerville. Because once they feel connected with their own souls and with their own community and with God, you know that that means that these are going to be people that you then aren't necessarily going to have to deal with, because I'm, and Pastor Gates and the rest of the community is going to be helping them to struggle with the demons and with the feelings of being an outcast. So thank you so much for considering this tonight. And I also want to thank Mr. Webb. We only just met. I really appreciate all the heart that you put into your work. Very much so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak on this item? Good evening. Please state your name.
Good evening. My name is Oleg Yevsikov, and I am 7 years in Placerville. I'm citizen of Placerville, and I don't know who I am in this hearing. Am I part of this community? Am I homeless? Last my 5 weeks, I'm homeless, or somebody else. But I want to say, I am part of this church. I am part of the Mercy Way Rescue Church. Why? Because here I found what we really need, fully being loved of those people. I know when I come to that people, I know that Pastor Mary, Pastor Frank, especially Mike Parr, they will be absolutely clear to me, absolutely good to me, with everything what I can expect, how I am, who I am. But I must say that I am part of this church, and I see a lot of problem during organizing what we were saying about how it will work. It's not shelter for the night, because I'm part of these services. I'm using this service. It's not a shelter, but it's church. And I want just to say that it's a lot of problem how to organize this, because it's really difficult to work with us people, homeless people, who sometimes we lost hope. But I found hope in this church. But I'm absolutely sure, and I see that again, Mike, Pastor Frank, and Pastor Mary, absolutely sure that this church, and they do everything to show to everybody who goes through the door in this building on Broadway, that this church. And I must say, I thank them. Thank you very much. It's really church. It's only what I want to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Michael Faber, and I'm a volunteer attorney with the Pacific Justice Institute. And the Pacific Justice Institute is a law firm that specializes in defending religious liberties and making sure that the Constitution, as well as our other laws, mesh together. And our Institute has taken an interest in this case, and I think that staff has already kind of spotted one of the problems we've seen. I believe you may have already received a letter from Matt McReynolds, which lays out in great legalese all the cases, and we won't go there tonight. You can read that yourself, but I just wanted to remind you that what we're talking about is whether or not we're going to allow someone to start a church on a busy commercial area right in the midst of a bunch of homeless shelters and programs on one side and a homeless camp on the other. And here we're trying to bring the light of Jesus Christ into a population that's not served by other churches in the area. And that's what this is all about. And of course, legally, it gets to the nitty-gritty details of what we're going to allow. So first of all, I should just say there should be no question of whether or not a church should be allowed to come in and serve these people. I think it's been addressed very well by the prior speakers that church is a lot more than just a Monday or a Wednesday night service. Church is an entire lifestyle, especially when it's a mission church that's bringing the light of Jesus Christ to a people that need a lot of service and a lot of help. And a lot of the area churches are already serving these people, and this church is serving as a place where they can congregate and be picked up and taken out to all the area churches. And thank you, Councilman, for your service on all of these things as well. I would just like to say that as we think about planning codes and health and welfare, that we also have to think about the Constitution of the United States, and we have to think, which has the free exercise of religion clause, and we must also think about Article 42 U.S.C. 2000 CC, which was intimated the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. And their Congress was aware of the fact that many times neutral laws about how many parking spaces you need per person that sits in a church can actually greatly and substantially impact how churches are able to do their functions and do their ministry. And it said if these laws, these zoning laws, substantially burden the ministry, now we can argue about what that means, but if it's found that there's a substantial burden, then the court will impose a strict scrutiny on that law to see whether it's constitutional in this circumstance and this use with these people in this application. So we get the idea of let's have only 20 people in the church. Well, we're already in violation. Evidently, one night 30 showed up. Now, many other nights, maybe only 4 or 5 might show up. But again, should we have to turn away people because there's not enough parking spaces in the front yard, because in other circumstances and other churches and other neighborhoods, parking is a big issue because everybody's going to jump in their car and drive to church. If there's a substantial burden, which we believe there would be with this arbitrary 20-person maximum, then essentially the question is there a compelling government interest? And if you can find one, which we don't think there would be, then is it narrowly tailored to the specific situation at hand? That's the standard that a court would look like at if this were litigated, this particular 20-person maximum. So we would ask you to waive that and just go with whatever the fire code is, whatever the safety code is. And secondly, on the hours, I've also been a pastor of churches. I've graduated from seminary. I've never had a church that I've ever been involved in where I couldn't go to church after 7 o'clock. I mean, that's just outrageously ridiculous. I mean, it's just, I just don't see how that could be. And yes, it's dark outside at 7 o'clock, but we talk about fairness and discrimination. Do you say to the bar on the other side of the road that they have to close at 7 because the homeless people might walk over there and they don't have a sidewalk or a street light to walk over to the bar? And then just on a practical thing, if they can't walk to the church, are they more likely to walk to the bar? And then where's the danger? Because now you have a bunch of people that are drunk on alcohol than maybe drunk on the Spirit of God. So likewise, so we would just suggest and request that the timeline be waived. I don't think that, practically anybody has any plans of being there after 10 o'clock, but we would, I don't know, just by way of compromise, offer an 11 o'clock cutoff point. I know that there's an interest in making sure the church is not a shelter. We've had some discussions. There is a letter in there talking about having people spend the night, and they would like to withdraw that particular thing and go ahead and abide by the condition of no spending the night at the church. So what we're interested in is basically asking that the CUP be approved, but there not be a arbitrary limit on the number of attendees, and there not be an arbitrary limit on the times of operation. And we'd also like a little clarification on the preventing the loitering in the parking lot as well, because that could be used. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Faber. Appreciate it. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Mattson. Congratulations to all of you. Pioneer family, born and raised in Placerville. I would like to speak to this issue. I've been a minister in my church. For many years, I worked with programs and to aid people with developmental disabilities, including deinstitutionalizing an organization that served the developmentally disabled, some of them with very severe handicaps. In addition, I'm the parent of a disabled child. I have embraced the concept of helping people that are disadvantaged. For many years, I employed a homeless man in our home as a housekeeper, cooked him hot meals, made sure he got where he needed to go. More recently, I'm helping a woman who is presently homeless. We've supported the work of the CRC. I am also a major property owner on Broadway. I am not unmindful of the needs of the individuals, and I think what we have to differentiate always are those individuals who are truly homeless and are trying to better themselves, and those segments of the population that we would maybe call transients, who have no interest in abiding with law or having consideration for other people. We've heard a lot tonight about infringement on rights, on constitutional law, on putting things aside for special benefits. As a property owner, not only on Broadway, some of our properties have been there over 60 years, we own property on Main Street. I have to abide by zoning regulations. I have to abide by ADA regulations. I have to abide by whatever else is lawful. So do my tenants. One of the things that I want to bring to the attention of this council, which I would be unmindful if I did not, is that you look also, as we are trying to serve these people and help them better themselves, how do we look out for the rights of those of us who are property owners, those people who have faith in our ability to lease to them and to provide an environment that encourages their business, and to those people who come onto Broadway to be customers. Let's face it, it is a very tough business community. Along with just trying to keep your business going and adhering to what hours or what other requirements you may have to have with your business, as I have to have as a property owner, there are those situations that we have faced that have cost us untold thousands and thousands of dollars. In 2004, we had 3 of our businesses burned down. The concept at that point was that someone who was disadvantaged in the community was responsible for this. 3 of our tenants were out of business for a year. We have had fires on the roof of our building, Hangtown Village Square. We have also had individuals sleeping on the roofs. We had a laundromat for many, many years that finally we terminated the lease because it was such a magnet for those people who would sleep on the roof, who got to be a real bother in the business and would discourage other people from coming. What I want you to be aware of is that everybody has rights. Everybody has responsibilities to be law-abiding and to be productive. What about that man that decided to sleep on our property? We nicknamed him Dirty Santa because he chose to sleep without pants on. What about those women that had to walk past him in the morning as they were going to their job? Were their rights infringed upon? What about those people who defecate on our buildings and behind our buildings and scare people away and panhandle? And we are faced with trying to deal with this. Just these past few months, I have spent thousands and thousands of dollars to provide a security guard so people felt comfortable coming on our property. I want to help those people who we can help get a leg up. I'm all for that. That has been my life's work. But please consider what we need to do to support those of us who are law-abiding and protect us from people who choose not to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Drobish, good evening.
My first question is Mercy Way Rescue an officially recognized church? Can anyone just claim to be a church and gain the protections thereof? I'm sure there has to be an actual legal definition. So one, do they qualify for that? Do any of those church, the board of directors of Mercy Way, do any of them live within the city of Placerville itself? As a bus stop and an overnight storage location for the nomadic shelter bus service, it's a good location, can't argue with that. I still have problems with increasing the concentration of services to the homeless in one area. It's getting to be too much. I just, a couple hours ago, talked to the local tire store. He's leaving the area. One of the reasons, concentration of homeless. He's just had it. But he's going to stay in the city, so. Mercy Way Rescue's proposed services sound like they would be good for Placerville's homeless, but they mentioned they will serve anyone. So out of state, it doesn't matter if they need help, they're going to help them. But at what point do we take on the world's problems? In regards to the lawyer asking about conditions being placed just on this proposal, the zoning parking requirements are they've been written in the zoning code for forever. They apply to everyone across the board, so nothing special there. Hours of operation was proposed by the proprietors. And in fact, they just wanted a few hours here and there. So it's been increased to 7 to 7, and those numbers came from the applicant. At the Planning Commission, Mr. Parr claimed that we haven't cost the city a dime. I disagree. Let me count the costs to the city and the taxpayers of Placerville. Okay, for this application, original staff time, then the additional staff time for this automatic appeal, loss of Lumsden Park, because they are the ones that would not stop gathering and feeding the homeless at the park, and the city had to shut it down, put a fence up, put a porta potty. All those costs are on me and other taxpayers, so they owe me a park. So in regards to the application fee, I'd say the application fee 100%, penalty by state law can go up to 5 times. And I would absolutely have no problem if penalties up to, we can count what the fence costs, what the porta potty costs is due to these people. I'd say absolutely don't let them skip on fees. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Good evening. Please state your name.
Hello, Steve
Hello.
Garish. Live in the county, attend Cold Springs Community Church, and volunteer at the shelter on Wednesday nights for the last couple years. And I'm just here to support the homeless, and just a person who attends church and a person who wants to give back to the community and help these people who need help. And that's really the only reason why I'm here, is just to show a vote of support from just somebody who volunteers at the shelter and really enjoys getting to meet these people, showing them a lot of love, talking to them, counseling them a bit if they need somebody to talk to, and they need help. And I don't see any reason why they shouldn't get it at this church, just as somebody who lives in the county.
Thank you, Mr. Garish. Good evening, Mr. Stanhope.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor. Evening. Actually just got back into town. I haven't read everything on this issue, but I have heard a few things tonight, and decided to want to make a point that at what point do we, the people of Placerville, or our city council, start dictating? I mean, you've got cities that are trying to protect homeless rights, not what we do with the homeless. And in Placerville, you guys have done a fantastic job of trying to help and benefit how we control the homeless or benefit the homeless, work with the homeless, so they're not just all over the place. You know, in San Francisco, they can do whatever they want. Here, we've tried to assist them to help them better their own lives. But the comments I've heard tonight, at what point do we start deciding the mission of a church becomes less important than we're dictating, is it a real church? I was unaware that anywhere in America do we get to dictate religion and how we define the correct, you know, at what point do we start going down that slippery slope? Are you Mormon, Catholic? Are you a good church, bad church? That becomes a slippery slope I don't believe our city council should ever try and work its way into. And I trust you guys to do the right decision, that these people need help, and this is a church offering help. So, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, and congratulations, Mayor Mattson.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
Yeah, Steve Puttiff,
Thank
by the
you
way.
so much.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I too am supportive of the homeless and the work that is being done all over to do the right thing for these unfortunate individuals. But my understanding is the city council and the city is doing a lot right now in working and trying to solve this issue in a very organized fashion, in a way that doesn't cause us to be inundated with the homeless, but in fact handle this on a very discreet, proper way so that the homeless get taken care of, and I'm all for that, but doing it in a way that's business sensitive as well, and community sensitive. So my suggestion to the council is for you to continue on your work and analyze what you're already doing in light of this new applicant. And if this disturbs what you're already doing, vote it no. If it supports what you're already doing, because you seem to have the right handle on the process, so then allow it. But if it doesn't, and that's the whole concept of what I believe the council needs to be considering.
Thank you very much. Yes. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's David Cook. I'm lead pastor at Cold Springs Community Church, which is a church in our community, and has been very involved. Pastor Frank is one of my staff members as well. So been very involved and aware of a lot of the processes. One of the things that I want to say is I just want to thank the staff for the care within which they have gone about analyzing the issue and presenting the issue. I thought that was a very positive presentation. And as I look at this and have watched the issue with the homeless over these number of years and struggling with it, and I'm a pastor of a church that has a lot of law enforcement in my congregation and that I am friends with and I pastor over. So I hear that side as well. And I know that the issue that you face as a council and the Planning Commission of protecting our community is something that's of great value to me and my family and our church. And that's something that I want to see be supported. But the issue of the homeless is not something that's going to go away. And everybody in the whole nation has been looking for that silver bullet that would take care of this problem. But nobody has found it. And the Mercy Way Mission Church is a piece of the puzzle. And from a person who comes from a faith perspective, I believe it is a very important, essential, because it is through faith that life transformation can happen. And I empathize with the challenge of those who are transients and those who truly want to bring change into their lives. And Jesus sort of told a story about that, of a field that had weeds in it and it had wheat in it, and you didn't want to go and pull the weeds up because you're going to pull up the good stuff as well. And there's a difficulty in that, and that eventually those things work themselves out. As a pastor in the community, I am concerned about the restrictions on occupancy and time of use as a potential precedent that could carry on into other churches or other places of worship. And I really, I understand maybe some of the concerns about noise or that type of thing, but 20 people, if that's your limit, 20 people, noise is not going to be your major issue, I don't think, unless all of them have drums, I guess. And the occupancy issue of limiting that to 20 people, I agree with the statements that have been made before that the fire code really should be the issue of the safety within the building. Some of the safety concerns of the pedestrian travel, I understand, but I don't think that is a limiting factor, and I think that is an unreasonable constraint on the mission of this organization and the desire that they have for impacting the community and reaching and helping the homeless community within us. So thank you so much for all your work you're doing on this.
Thank you, Pastor Cook. Is there anyone else before we close the public hearing? Yes. Please come to the podium.
Speak it, I'm like I am. Hi, my name is Paula Lee, and I live in Placerville, not in the city, but I'm part of Solid Rock Faith Center, and we are part of the Nomadic Shelters. And I've been part of the homeless ministry helping for this is my second year, and it's transformed my life. I own a business, and my business is in Rancho Cordova. And we have a huge homeless population down there. And I have wonderful, we don't have names for them, but people who sleep at my doorways, who bring beds, who bring things, who have parties in our backyard. So I am aware of what it does to a business and running a business. And but I also know that there is no place for them to go there. And there's no place for them to actually be a part of. There's not a community or of outreach that actually helps them, so they will go and do whatever they can because there is no place. Mercy Way is a place where they can come and get spiritual help that will eventually lead them to hopefully off the street, but it will also give them a direction to CRC to get the help that they need to maybe get on Social Security, to get the old man that I'm going to cry off the street who don't belong there and need to be in an apartment and help. It's a part of it. It isn't a place that just homeless come and hang out. It is a Greyhound bus station in the smallest sense, where it actually gets to take them away from the community that has to put up with them during the day while they walk around, so that they're not sleeping on their doorways at night, and they're actually sleeping in a warm bed and a warm place and a safe place that they are too, and can get peace and love and a warm meal. And then in the mornings actually get to come back and still be loved and go to the next place of help, or going to look for a job, or their next sense of going to a meal. So it is a viable, reasonable place to be in the area that it is. So I hope, and thank you so much for your time in listening to all of this.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. All right. Okay. One more, all right. One more speaker. Ms. Rodman. Good evening.
Good evening. Susan Rodman again. The Greyhound Bus Depot seems to me a reasonable place to do something like this. I think if we look around this room, there are more than 20 people here. And yet it doesn't pose a problem for the size of any fairly small church congregation. And I don't think that right out here there are sufficient parking places, according to the code, to take care of the number of people in the room here. So I think perhaps their concern about limiting the number of people to the fire code rather than the parking spaces, especially when most of those people are pedestrians. Might as well face the fact there. And the timing, to say from 7 to 7 seems pretty restrictive. My own church has activities in the evening that go beyond 7 o'clock, but everything's wrapped up by around 10. And some things start earlier than 7 in the morning as well. When we had the sunrise services, those start before 7. And part of this depends on the season of the year. As we move into spring and the days are longer, that makes a difference in the safety of people walking along the street too. When it's daylight, you can see people a lot easier than you can at this time of the year when we're in the shortest daylight time of the year. So I think we need to be a little more sensitive about that. I absolutely agree. We don't want to see this used as overnight. With only one restroom, that's really not practical. So those are my comments. I think that it's a legitimate use. It's probably the best use for the current situation that we have with our homeless population, to give them a place where they can receive some spiritual help.
Thank you very much. All right. Okay, at this point, we're going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the council for discussion. And thank you, everyone who weighed in on this issue. I do have a number of comments that I think might help frame the council's discussion, and with your indulgence, I'd like to go first on this. I usually don't, but I would like to start tonight. So, I know again. Thank you, Vice Mayor. The crux of the issue tonight is not how the council feels about Mercy Way Rescue as a church. They are protected under the First Amendment of the Constitution. And as elected officials, we are sworn to uphold the Constitution. The issue is ensuring that Mercy Way Rescue meets the current use and building codes of the property that any other entity would be asked to meet, period. The applicant has asked that they be treated the same as any other applicant, and I agree. The homeless and disadvantaged deserve the same rights and protections that our building codes provide the rest of our community. Codes do not discriminate, and they are put in place not to overly burden you as a church, but to protect the people you serve. And I'm sure Mercy Way Rescue would agree that their worshipers are worthy of the protection our building codes provide, and of the civil liberties that ADA access laws ensure. We all have to follow these laws. Mercy Way Rescue does too. That's the bottom line. And I would ask tonight that a conditional use permit include provisions to address the safety issues regulating the use of the property. And this does bring us to an issue that I'm a little concerned about, or confused about. That's the overnight accommodations. Pastor Gates said that overnight accommodations may occur. Mr. Faber said there would be no overnight guests and that we could put a limit to that and close it down at 11. I don't know what to believe because the application keeps changing, and that brings me to an issue that I have great concern about, and that's trust and transparency. We need to make sure we are dealing with the actual use of the property and not just the stated intentions which keep changing. When the applicant came before the Planning Commission in December, they stated that they were a church and did not wish to be a shelter. And while I do realize that the scope of church activities is extremely broad under the law, there was no mention of overnight accommodations at that point, and the Planning Commission and the public dealt with the issue within those parameters. Now that this issue is on appeal, in our paperwork, Mercy Way Rescue stated to this council, and I quote, "Churches allow people to occasionally spend the night. As a church, we need to have the ability to use our building for any purpose we deem necessary." And they go on to list various overnight activities. Now let me be very clear. I do not have a problem with Mercy Way Rescue having overnight guests. I don't intend to limit their ministry. I applaud Mercy Way Rescue's mission and goal of serving the homeless, poor, hungry, mentally ill, and addicted people of El Dorado County. It's an outreach that is needed in our community. What I ask is that they deal with this council and this city from a standpoint of honesty and integrity. I would expect that from any applicant coming before this council, and I certainly expect it from a church. If we need to help Mercy Way Rescue with the proper safety codes to accommodate overnight guests, great, let's do that. But don't use the threat of lawsuit to operate outside the codes of the rules and regulations of our city that everyone else has to follow. The protection of the First Amendment does not give you free rein to ignore the laws of our land. And another problem is that this city has had experience with Mercy Way Rescue saying one thing and then doing another. And their very narrow mission and focus has sometimes come at the expense of the rest of our community. And if they are going to have a permanent location, this problem cannot continue. Here are a few examples. It was brought up this evening that we had a problem with meals being delivered to the homeless in the park. We didn't ask that the feeding stop. We didn't ask you to stop this activity. It's a valuable activity. We asked that the feeding be done in a more appropriate location that didn't have as much impact to our neighborhoods and our business districts. You gave us your word you would take Lumsden off the rotation if we found alternate locations. You looked the city manager in the eye and told us that. After we opened 2 alternate locations, I went up to Lumsden Park and found 7 people sitting on benches waiting for lunch. I told them the park was no longer a drop-off point and directed them up to Hangtown Haven. Their response? They laughed at me and then very smugly said, "We know who you are, and Mike says he doesn't have to listen to you, that he can do whatever he wants, and he's going to continue to bring us food here. We're not moving." We had to close Lumsden Park in part to break the chain of illegal activity that had been allowed to continue. That's just not right. On a much more serious note, on another occasion last year, our police department had a warrant for someone's arrest who was staying in the nomadic shelter. Mr. Parr, you were volunteering that night and were in another pastor's church. You refused our officers' entry under the idea of sanctuary. When you obstructed our officers, the pastor was called, and he immediately directed that our officers be allowed in to carry out their duty. Your actions would have allowed a potentially dangerous individual to remain among the folks gathered in the church that night, putting them and our community volunteers at risk. That's obstruction of justice, which is a criminal offense, because in the United States, religious sanctuary has never been recognized in state or federal law. You have an obligation to work with our police department and not against them in ensuring that our entire community is safe. And lastly, in December, when you weren't granted a conditional use permit by our Planning Commission due to a tied vote, your own supporters urged you to stop operating until you were given legal permission. I applaud those members and volunteers who stand on principle and followed the letter of the law. Your response? You opened anyway, and you have continued to operate without a use permit or the legal permission to occupy those premises. Jesus himself said, "Render unto Caesar which is Caesar's," which to me speaks of the relationship that needs to be fostered between secular authority and Christianity. As secular authority, we have no desire to thwart the mission or the work of Mercy Way Rescue or any other church. What we desire is a cooperative relationship built on trust, and right now we don't have one. As good as your mission may be, it will get lost in your blatant disregard for the city. And that's a real shame, for this council at this moment in time has proven to be open and supportive of solutions to the homeless challenge. Just think what we could do if we could work together in a trustworthy manner. And finally, it's important to understand that there are plans underway to move away from Upper Broadway being the concentrated area for homeless services. There just isn't the infrastructure to support it, and we're moving in that direction. All I ask is that you deal honestly with this, and as Pastor Gates said, be good neighbors. If this conditional use permit is granted tonight, I expect that it will be a new start toward a cooperative, trustworthy relationship where you can serve our homeless population and be a good and faithful steward to our residents, our businesses, and the community at large. In your own response to our Planning Commission's denial, you state, and I quote, "The unconditional love, grace, and the unmerited mercy of Jesus is creating and establishing trusting relationships." I implore you personally to stand behind those words and establish a trustworthy relationship with this city. We are not your enemy. We have no desire to obstruct your work. We only ask that you follow the laws of this land that we would ask any other applicant. And so I will be recommending that this CUP be granted with some of the changes, but I'd like the other council members to weigh in on this. So with that, Vice Mayor Hagan.
Whoa. I'd like to make clarification. Mr. Faber had a comment on our parking requirements. Our parking requirements are one parking spot per every 4 seats in a church, regardless of which church it is. If you are a new church and you come into town, you're going to be required that. As far as Ms. Rodman's comments about our parking at the town hall, you also note that there's a public parking garage, parking area across the street. And when this downtown area was developed and the parking garage was in place several years ago, this is in a parking district. And as a result of the parking districts, the businesses in this community that don't have any parking at all, like Cumbelix or Robinson's or any of the other small stores on Main Street that don't have any parking, it's part of the parking district, and they pay a fee per number of spots based on the size of their building. So if you were to put a new building in town today, you'd have to pay a fee based on those spots in lieu of the parking. So that's how it's worked out here, where the town hall outside, yes, doesn't have, I don't know how many spots per would be required for this particular hall, but a gathering hall, and if you look, there's a sign on the back that tells what the fire code allows in this structure. So we're dealing with 2 different issues: fire code allowance of 49 on the size property and the parking allowance for a church. So again, not to dissuade or change anybody's idea of what parking is allowed. There is no parking district on Upper Broadway. Therefore, our current zoning requires that if it's used as a church, it has to have so many parking spots based on that. That's how that number comes up with 20. There are 5 spots currently shown. When we recommend the plans for the acceptance of the CUP, we are going to ask that they provide a diagram and plans that show what changes they're going to make to the building, including the site plan, which will show the parking striping and what the maximum number of cars they can put there. So if they can show 10 parking spots, they can have 40 people. So that's not an issue. Obviously, if you have an overflow, which happens at my church on Sundays, not every Sunday, but between services sometimes, and also, excuse me, on Easter and on Christmas, you can't find a place to park on our church. And it's not because of the number of seats, it's because of the number of people attending. And Dr. Marga has been there and preached and done a great job. So I'm just saying that we're not going to treat them any different than we do any other church. And I think that's the key thing. But the threat of lawsuit is, to me, that was received from your law firm, your Pacific Law Institute, 3 days after I received my council agenda, which already had some of the same stuff on Relaga involved in here, was kind of an interesting way to approach us. But I think that's, I mean, appreciate it from the standpoint of information, but from the standpoint of a threat, no, you can't. You've already talked. It's my turn, and it's the council's turn. So, but I heard you and I read your letter, and I really do appreciate the input you gave us on the number of cases you talked about. But be clear that I don't think any requirement we're going to request is going to be any different than anybody else. But we've had horrible experience with one individual who has created this threat, if you will, or this chair, and now the guise of a church. And someone has said the guise of a church. Unfortunately, because of Mr. Parr's reputation, it precedes the good work that Mission Way appears to be doing. So, and that the other pastors are doing. Pastor Cook does a great job. Mary does a great job. Pastor Gates is doing a great job, and a lot of us are working to help the homeless. And let's go forward and help the homeless. Let's not threaten each other with lawsuits and sayings that we're going to hire our attorney. We've got an attorney.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Hagan. Councilmember Wilkins.
I was going to say, are we taking the 7 to 7? They are willing to go no overnight, 10, 11?
Whatever comments you have,
That's my comment.
what are you suggesting?
Okay, I'm suggesting 10, 11, not 7 to 7, at 7 at night.
Okay.
And also, if they can squeeze in and show us the parking, then we can go to the 49, and not just limit it to 20 if they can stick to the zoning that everybody else would and make it work to go to the 49 if they want to. I'm okay with that.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Wilkins. Councilmember Borelli.
Yes, well, it sounds to me like everything's pretty much been said. I, too, am really offended by the threat of a lawsuit. I don't think that's any way to solve a problem, especially it being church-based. I was just astounded when I saw that, and I was very offended. I have to applaud us. I think we've gone a long way in extending a hand and doing everything we can to try to work with the homeless and to help all the folks. And I just, this is not a time for fighting or threatening lawsuits, et cetera. I also agree with Tricia that I think we ought to think more about the hours. I don't think 7 to 7 is probably the right time frame for a church, but I think we could maybe set a limit at 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I applaud all the folks who are trying to establish this. I have a bit of a problem, as Wendy and Carl already talked about, in that we have had these past problems with an individual, and it does leave a sour taste in our mouth. We're trying to, there comes a time when I know trust, but yet when we've had this blatantly thrown in our faces, it's a little hard. So I am in favor of allowing the church, but they have to meet the rules that everybody else does. That's my feeling.
Thank you. Councilmember Patton.
Thank you, Mayor Mattson. I'm a new kid up here, or not such a kid, but I don't have the same past history with the applicant that some of my colleagues do. But I do come with history in the planning department, and my first concern was that this application was somehow being treated than any other application that came before us, or before the city. And I had grave concerns and spoke at length with Mr. Webb about why didn't they have to do a site plan review. It's very common that when you do a change of use in my world, as this is, the Greyhound Bus Depot hasn't been there, I don't even know, 25, 30 years? I don't even know how long. It was there when I moved here in 1980, but I haven't. The new bus station, have you seen the requirements that was built with? They have separate bathrooms, they have shelter, they have drive-through for the buses, they have lots of parking. I think that it's gotten tangled up with this religious rules. And quite frankly, I have to agree with the council that church is great there. I don't really want to get into what is a church and what isn't a church. You're free, as far as I'm concerned, they're free to have the hours of operation, whatever they want. That isn't my concern. My concern is that they abide by the rules that any other business or church in our community abides by. The Baptist Church on Cold Springs Road did a huge development, huge parking lot with lighting, with signage. It was all approved and done by the book. Very, very small, not a church, but Placerville Coffee Depot, very, very small. They had to redirect their parking arrangement so that they could accommodate the rules that this community expects from new businesses. That's what I would ask of this council. I would ask that this application come forward to the Planning Commission with a site plan review that includes not only the parking lot, but a lighting plan. That's an extremely dark parking lot. Is there any plans for lighting? And also, one of my biggest concerns is signage. There's an illegal rooftop sign right now on the building. What's the proposal for that? How is that going to be remedied? Let's make this part of our community that works not only for the community, the other businesses in the area, but for the citizens and the people, hopefully the people that will use the facility. So that's what I would respectfully ask my colleagues, is to ask for a site plan review to go to the Planning Commission, which is usually the body that reviews those.
Okay. Do I hear a motion? Would anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we follow staff recommendations and approve the CUP 2012-03 with the following findings, and those findings are A through D. Also, under conditional use permit, that the CUP shall apply to only the parcel number, 49-190-25, regardless of any change of ownership. It shall allow the 968 square foot building located at 1750 Broadway to be utilized as a church facility and a shuttle stop for rotating winter shelter, consistent with the following provisions. I'm going to remove item A. I don't think we need to set hours of operation. I think they'll find their own way to those hours of operation. We don't set hours of operations for my business. We don't set it for Starbucks, and we don't set it for In-N-Out. Facility, and then so should be B. As far as the occupancy, currently, under their current plans, my understanding was they applied for, was 20 was okay, Mike, with the existing parking striping, but I would ask them to bring forward a plan that would include the demonstration that the ability to increase up to a maximum of 49 which would be the maximum allowed by the fire code. When they start getting beyond that or to that point, they've got some problems. So items B, C, D, E, there's a couple of grammatical errors, like on E, they could remove during hours of operation. It just should be allowed, you should be allowed to do group counseling on site. That's fine, subject to the occupancy limits. The facility shall not utilize food preparation without installation of the appropriate facilities and approval of a building permit and clearance from the El Dorado County Environmental Health Department. That's item D. Item E.
G?
G. The facility shall not utilize, I think we're just going to remove that whole thing. Item 3 is on there, that's okay. I'm sorry, 3 is the, shall become effective and issued immediately after the city council grants permit. So it's effective today after we grant the permit, assuming we grant it. Item 4, they have to bring plans into the, back to the Planning Commission within no later than 1 year. I know at one time we talked maybe no later than 6 months.
6 months is what I would prefer.
So to show that they're conforming to their plans that were required at tonight's hearing. And the process would be to come back through the Planning Commission. Any alterations of future use of the occupancy would have to be authorized by either getting another conditional use permit or amending the conditional use permits with public hearings and notice, which may or may not be necessary. After City Council approval, the applicant shall submit 3 copies of the construction plans. That's item 6 on there. Supporting documents for change in occupancy, prepared by the California licensed architect or engineer to the building division. And that's, again, typical that we do with anything else. And it says, as it currently exists without benefit of the building permit, we can double or go up to 5 times the fees. I'm going to say that we're going to leave the fees at whatever the building permit fee would be, the normal fee. I don't want to double the fee at this point. I think they've seen what they have. We can't. I'm not for waiving any of the other fees. The $700 fee for this hearing. We've spent a lot of time on this and a lot of staff time and money. And it continues on in 6. I don't see anything else in there. The item 7 is 5 parking spaces shall be provided and striped as shown on the plan submitted and approved to the satisfaction of the city. A minimum of 1 space shall be van accessible. Enclosed refuse or recycling containers, again, that's not any requirement that any other business wouldn't do. You have trash areas, you have to enclose those. If you place any outdoor structures, they need to be shown on the plans. There's a comment on there about possibly potential storage shed in the future. There are some requirements for that, but you can check with the building department on those. There has to be an accessible path, item 10, to the entrance of the building. 11, the encroachment permit shall be obtained if any work within the city right-of-way or within city facilities. That would mean there's a property line somewhere, an easement for the street, and it goes into that parking area for the old bus stop. As long as you don't touch that area, you won't need an encroachment permit, but if you do any, if they do any actual grading or paving in that area, they'd have to do that. They'll attempt to maintain free of debris and litter at all times, and they should or shall take appropriate measures such as signage and measures to prevent loitering in the parking lot at all times. Again, signage is what most businesses would be required to do. That seems to be a reasonable request about loitering. I believe the police department has a wording that you can use on the sign, and they can respond if there is an issue. But if without the posting of the proper signage, we can't help. So that's my motion.
That's
In other
it?
words-
All right, we have a,
Who's going to repeat that?
we have a motion on the table. Do we have
Second.
a motion and a second? All right, all those in favor? Oh, yes, I'm
If
sorry.
there's any changes.
I'm sorry, anyone changes or amendments?
I guess so you're not willing to have the applicant submit, to go through the process of site plan review?
I think at this time, this is their conditional use permit hearing. And because it's already been to the planning commission once, I don't want them to go back through that unless they have a problem down the road. I think staff can handle it.
Then
and
would you be interested in amending your motion to include lighting for the parking lot?
No.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Okay, motion carries. All right, and with that, we move on to discussion item 11. We'll take a 3-minute break to let the crowd disperse. Thank you.
That was good. Was it okay?
I'll ask our attorney.
We talked about that at another, there was that came up in December. And I don't think.
Okay, thank you, Terry. All right, thank you. All right.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Hello, you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Yeah, sorry, it was long, long-winded. Is that okay? Thanks, sweetie. It was wonderful seeing you guys out here. Thank you so much. Well, thank you very much. Oh, you're so sweet. I did. Really? Oh, thank you. We're going to call the council back to order so we can finish what's left on our agenda. Okay. We're going to wait one more minute for Councilmember Wilkins. All right. We will now come back and move on to item 11, which is a discussion action item. The extension of the temporary road closure of a portion of Fair Lane to February 3rd, 2013, and authorize staff to extend a 1 day for every non-working day due to weather. Mr. Webb, you're up again.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, City Council. Yes, the discussion item before you tonight is just that. It's a request for adjustments with respect to the Western Placerville Interchange project, in particular Phase 1A, which is currently under construction, which is Phase 1A is adjustments to on a portion of Fair Lane in preparation for the next phases of the project, and Phase B being Fair Lane curve correction, bike lanes, and sidewalk. In Phase 1A, which is currently underway, includes the main component of it as the new on-ramp to Interstate or Highway 50. The proposal before the council tonight has really 5 components to it, 4 of which involve contract change orders to the contract that we currently have in place with Veerkamp Construction, who's currently the contractor on the project. The other item is the request for an extension of the temporary road closure that the council previously approved at a prior meeting, to extend that further to February 3rd, and to authorize staff to allow an additional extension for 1 day, basically for every non-working day due to weather that may come up between now and then. The contract change orders being proposed are fairly routine in nature for adjustments in material price indexes. One is for an adjustment, an increase in this case of $10,000 for flagging and traffic control costs, but there's also a component for a decrease in an estimated amount of $66,500 and change for reduced traffic control as a result of the temporary closure of Fair Lane. And then a final change order for an increase in the amount of $167,484 for changes in retaining wall, a deletion of a retaining wall, the addition of embankment fill, and moreover, the improvement in improving the alignment of Fair Lane to correct the substandard curve located just adjacent to the Sheriff's Department facility. I think everyone's fairly familiar with that curve going up to the county offices. The substandard curve was originally envisioned to be part of Phase 1B of the project. We saw this in working with our project manager with Valley Cooper and working with Veerkamp, identified an earlier opportunity to take on a component of Phase 1B, and that is the curve correction piece of it, at this time commensurate with Phase 1A instead. Because of some substantial savings both in time but also in expense that could be realized from doing it now. What made this possible is basically the securing of right-of-way along that frontage at a time earlier than otherwise expected. And the curve correction, if completed now, would eliminate the need for a $150,000, quote-unquote, throwaway retaining wall that would be needed to support the existing substandard curve. And ultimately, that curve correction as a standalone project, if it were undertaken on its own, would be estimated at over $600,000. By performing the work now, it would result in a savings of approximately $450,000. Obviously a very substantial cost savings, but also a time savings. This is really the primary impetus for the request to extend the road closure, is to provide the time to the contractor to install the curve correction, and hence the request to extend to February 3rd and then reopening on February 4th. Certainly there are other alternatives. Obviously a road closure, even temporary one, is not a decision to be made lightly by the city council. There are businesses that do have impacts associated with that. There's the County Fair Shopping Center, there's the truck service facility, yard service facility next to that, and there's the county offices, including the sheriff's office. With those concerns in mind, staff has had conversations with those affected businesses, and in particular also with the county, because many of their employees obviously are directly impacted, and also we've had conversations with the sheriff's office. They are supportive of the extended closure, understand the rationale and reasoning for it, but there are alternatives should the council have concerns about it that would involve traffic control while construction went on. However, staff has outlined that there would be costs associated with those. Ultimately, staff does recommend approval of the requested change orders, including the approval of proceeding with the curve correction and authorizing staff to continue with the temporary closure of that segment of Fair Lane to February 3rd, and authorizing staff to allow one-day extension for every day of weather delay that may come between now and then. So be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webb. Does the council have any questions for Mike? Yes, Carol.
Yeah, Mike, can you explain to me, so in Phase 1A was funded $6 million. 1B will be funded from, where's that money going to come from? And will the money that's been contributed from the county and the sewer enterprise fund, will that money be paid back when 1B, that phase, gets funded? Or is that just money that's gone? Or how does that work?
Well, I think overall, the entirety of the Western Placerville Interchange project is estimated at approximately $40 million. The Phase 1A component alone was originally estimated at $6 million. The actual bids came in higher than that, and hence necessitating a need to in a agreement with the county to provide some supplemental funds to allow the project to proceed forward. As far as 1B funding, that would come in a future cycle of funding. Moreover, I think I don't know that it would necessarily be money given back as it is a greater hedge on future bid amounts and contingency amounts. I think really what it does for us is increase our cushion, if you will, in terms of the project contingency, which is at this point has been established at, I believe it's 10% contingency. Thank you. At yes, right here, at $801,000. What this would do in effect, I think, is provide a greater buffer towards any other unforeseen circumstances that may come up with either this phase and as it proceeds, or potentially future phases where we could realize that and utilize that buffering. So I'm not sure if that completely answers your question, but
I'm not sure. I think what I was looking for is 1B. Because eventually when 1B gets built, there's more components to it than just this curve correction.
Correct. Right.
So that has a price tag of X amount of dollars.
Right.
So now that price tag is going to go down. And that funding, I think, is kind of already earmarked, right? I mean,
It is not. And that's part of the problem. Phase 1B is currently not funded. And so, yeah, that piece is still out there. Now, we have some options that we're going to look at. For example, there's a potential for another round of additional CMAQ funds that may come up. Because the main components, I'm going to look at my city engineer, that are left are curb, gutter, and sidewalk primarily, plus bike lanes, all of which would qualify for CMAQ funding. So that is something that we're going to look at as it becomes available through the El Dorado County Transportation Commission. So the piece of this that we do need to note is if there is funding left over from this, which we expect there will be, what is left over will be returned to the county of that $1.2 million that they gave us. That will be sent back to the county.
But they're not expecting us to, I mean, there's no repayment plan.
No.
They agreed to this because they felt as though it was a project worthwhile for.
Yes, this is a grant. It's not a loan, it is a grant. However, whatever's left over of that grant, we have agreed to return to the county after the project.
Are there any additional council questions for staff? No? All right. At this time, we'll invite the public to open public comment on this item. Good evening, Mr. Drobish. Oh, I'm so sorry. Forgive me.
Good evening. This sounds great. Savings are amazing. And going forward, state's broke, fed's broke. Chance of getting grant money down the road is getting smaller and smaller, so do it now. I can't believe that curve was originally built like that. That's crazy. So this is fantastic. And by the way, we probably don't have city money at risk because the lawyer was happy. So.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any other comments? Ms. Rodman, good evening again.
This is the real reason I came to this meeting.
For a good laugh?
Yes. I think that the closure is working well now. What I've seen where I need to go in that neighborhood, it has not been a problem. The signage is good to tell you which way to go to get to where you need to be. If you want to go to a business or you want to go to the county offices, it's very easy. So I think saving us some money is a really good idea. That curve is a nasty one, and if we can take care of it now and save ourselves pain in the future, especially if it requires building a retaining wall to hold it where it is and then tearing it down so we can fix it, that's crazy. Let's do it now. And I would say make the extension work as long as it needs to work, because everybody's used to it now. The thing that throws people off is when you have a road closure and everybody gets used to how to get around it, and then you take it away, and then you put it back on. So let's just keep it in place till we're done and get this thing done.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion. Do I have a discussion or a motion?
I move that we adopt item 11.1 as reported in the staff report.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded, and because it's a money item, Ms. Zita, roll call vote?
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hagan?
Aye.
Mayor Mattson?
Aye.
Councilmember Patton?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins?
Aye.
Fabulous. Motion carries, and I thank staff and our contractors for being such good tax stewards or good stewards of taxpayer dollars. That's wonderful.
Yeah, no, and if I may, I always want to throw a pitch for our staff when I can, but my hat's off to Nate Stong, our city engineer, and Keith Flaherty with Valley Cooper, and also Veerkamp for really, putting their heads together to come up with good ways and good ideas to save cost and time and effort on these projects. So thank you.
Right.
Excellent work, Nate. Thank you so very much.
Yeah.
This is a huge savings. Very much appreciated. That's great. All right, item 11.2, consider payment to optional litigation surcharge of 10% or $550.70 to the League of California Cities to assist the cost of litigation. That's a mouthful. Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This hopefully will be quick. Each year, we pay dues to the League of California Cities, as most other cities. I'm not aware of very few, if any, that do not in the state of California. We do get great benefit from that as far as tracking bills at the Capitol, informing us of changes, et cetera, and lobbying on our behalf to protect local revenues. So they do, in my mind, a tremendous job. With this year's invoice, the only reason this would be normally we process the invoice without coming to council. It's in your budget, et cetera. However, this year they did ask for a 10% surcharge to assist covering litigation that they've had over the last several years and ongoing that they've had. They were involved with the redevelopment litigation as well as other things that have litigations they've had to protect local funding that comes from the state. And so I thought it was appropriate that I bring this to the council to ask, do you want to pay this fee? It's optional. They make it clear in there that it is an optional fee. It's not required that it does not affect our dues at all. But they've requested that we consider this additional surcharge of $550. Staff's position on it, what I've recommended is that perhaps we should not pay this only because of our current budget condition. I've got, our situation with MTO time, 10% pay cuts for employees, et cetera. I have a hard time recommending extra payments, but I will leave that open to the council's direction. So.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Any council questions before we open public comment?
Yeah, the question I would have with the city attorney is how much equivalent legal advice and litigation information do we actually save by having them do these challenges and work? It would seem to me it's substantial and well worth the 10%.
Well, yeah, if we were to bring some of the actions that they bring, it would cost us in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we do save that, but so does every other city in the state of California benefit from that. As far as individual matters, virtually none. They're just specific to us.
Right.
Okay.
My thinking when I was reading this is we pay this a rather large fee, and we've all had to cut back to save money, and I don't know how much they have cut back. I don't know whether that's an appropriate question to ask of them or not, but I know they have quite a huge staff. Have they thought about maybe cutting back that they can?
The only thing I can say in that area is that they have managed to hold dues constant. They haven't raised dues for cities.
And I saw that.
And just as every other, I know that we do, and I'm sure they do, they have increased expenses in terms of employee costs, personnel costs, et cetera. So I'm assuming that they have had to do cutbacks in order to meet that without raising revenues, essentially.
I think they ought to share that with us.
I can ask.
So we can, I mean, because I think it's a legitimate question. I know, like Sedcor, they're doing with a very minimal staff. A lot of people are, and I just
Right.
wonder how much, that they have.
I can ask if the council like, yeah.
I might just be the devil's advocate for a
Okay.
moment. And I'm really neutral on this as far as city attorney is concerned, but it's times when the state doesn't have a lot of money that they start looking to local government to raid the money. So what I'm getting at is they have had, even though all of us have had to cut back, they have had more costs in litigating the state grabs than they would have necessarily in good times. They've been trying to defend our sales tax, defend our revenues, types of things. So their costs really go up in these kinds of times is the point that I'm trying to make.
So I should forgive them.
Are there any other questions? All right.
I just really briefly wanted to call attention to this investment report that the league put out. It's staggering to me the amount of money that is represented just to the city of Placerville that they show on this chart. Vehicle license fees, $232,000. I mean, that's a sizable amount of money that they represented us in. I mean, I don't know exactly to what extent that number comes back to us, but $550 in the world of legal aid is just nothing. I would certainly
You're right,
support
an hour.
paying the $500 extra.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. At this point, we're going to open public comment. Is there any member of the public that would wish to speak on this item? Good evening, Michael.
What? This does sound dirt cheap for a period when the state is just trying to rip every dollar they can out of every jurisdiction. So if these guys are fighting the state to, keep more money in our pockets, $550, I might chip in some bucks. So.
Good Michael
Do a
pace.
fundraiser. So.
You could go up and down
anything
Main
to
Street.
take a swipe at the state. So go for it.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else wish to speak on this? All right, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for direction or motion. Do I have a motion or other discussion?
I'll move that we pay the surcharge.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All right. And roll call vote, Ms. Zito.
Just for clarification, I couldn't understand who the second was.
Say again.
I'm sorry.
Who was the second?
The second was made
second
by...
was Councilmember
Carol,
Patton.
thank you.
Sorry about that.
Councilmember Borelli,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hagan,
Aye.
Mayor Mattson,
Aye.
Councilmember Patton.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins.
No.
Okay. Motion carries. All right. With that, we move on to council reports and requests for future agenda items. All right. And with this, let's start with you, Councilmember Borelli.
Well, December was a very, very busy month. Not so much council business, but going to parties and bidding adieu to our supervisors.
Yes,
and
true.
and parties with the city and all for good. I did. We had a closed session for city council. I attended the EDAC meeting, and I also attended a 2x2 meeting. And so that was my official.
Thank you so much. And Councilmember Patton, I know you probably don't have any official reports. Are there any future agenda items you'd like to bring forward?
I don't have any right now.
All
Thank
right.
you, though, Mayor.
We'll get you later. All right, Vice Mayor Hagan.
No official meetings that I can recall. Just looking at my calendar, and it was just several events that I was expected to be at because I sit up here.
Exactly. All right, thank
Lots
you.
of parties.
There were lots. It was such is our burden to bear. Yes. Councilwoman Wilkins, have anything to add to this?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right, you will. And I attended everything that everyone else attended up here, and I did have the pleasure of sitting down with Sharon Schertzinger, of the head of the El Dorado County Transportation Commission, to get up to speed on all of the issues that our Transportation Commission is dealing with and all the roadway projects. So I look forward to being more involved in that issue in the future. All right, items pulled from the consent calendar, we had none. City manager and staff reports. Mr. Morris.
I'm looking at my staff. I don't think we have anything. Oh, Susan has one item.
Only a reminder that the council has in front of you, and there's some in the back, that the recruitment has started for our usually odd-numbered year following an even-yeared election for committee, commissions, and boards. Because it was a two-seat council election, most of the committees are seeking 2 members. We're recruiting for Planning Commission, Park and Rec Commission. Historic Advisory Committee, I believe, has one of the incumbents has chosen not to. We had thought that because we have so many new committees, that those folks haven't even served a full term, we would allow them to roll over into a full term if possible. But we did have an incumbent state that they weren't interested in doing that. So for that purpose, we'll open that recruitment. And I believe Community Pride. It'll be on the website shortly, and it'll be 3,500 copies in the utility bills going out on Thursday, I believe.
Wonderful.
So,
Susan,
Mhm.
isn't there also an opening on the community?
Action Council?
Action Council that's a county-wide,
Mhm.
and
Um,
there's an opening from somebody from the city.
There is a citizen, and it's not necessarily the city council's appointment to make.
Right.
The Community Action Council is a group which is, I believe, housed under Human Services at the county.
And the senior center is actually
right.
where it's
Right.
where the
And I've
information
seen
comes
that. I believe her name is, her last name is Walker.
Star
And-
Walker.
Star Walker. And her phone number was listed in the Mountain Democrat as a contact to contact her directly. There was a point in time where the city council did make those appointments. Now it's just open and people apply, and I believe it's because it's a difficult thing to recruit for. They're looking for someone normally that has a retired nature, that has the availability to serve, that's interested in serving those particular populations, aged, unemployed, the areas where the Community Action Council is advisory to the Board of Supervisors.
Correct.
At the next council meeting, the mayor will be making her appointments for the council's appointments to other agency committee, commissions, and boards. And then you will all, those agencies will be notified, and the council members' assignments will then take over for the Transportation Commission, El Dorado Transit. There's 5 or 6 that our council members serve on other agencies, and that'll happen at the next council meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Zito, and thank you for all your work in helping us fill these vacancies. I know it takes a tremendous amount of your time, and you're very diligent about it, and we just very much appreciate your efforts. Upcoming items. The items tentatively scheduled for the next regular city council meeting include a second reading of an ordinance amending the municipal code 1-14-3, mayor's appointments for council members and other agency boards, Measure J report, Duffy Park playground equipment, that's exciting, and Western Placerville interchanges engineering agreement. And I would like to remind everyone here and at home, our next community chat is scheduled for January 29th, 2013 at 6 p.m. And I believe that's on the island annexation issue, is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you just briefly explain what our purpose of that tonight is? Because I know that's a hot issue.
Yeah, that, as you know, that's been going on some time. And there is a law at the state that has a sunset on it. If we are going to take advantage of this island annexation law, we need to be proceeding with that. Right. So the purpose of this neighborhood chat is going to be reviewing that. It'll allow the public to come in and ask questions of virtually every service we hope to provide that will compare what my service is as a county resident and what would it be if I were annexed into the city. So they have a clear understanding of what annexation means to them. So we'll try to do that. The idea is to treat it more as an open house where people don't need to be there right at 6 to hear the information necessarily. We'll be there from 6 to 8 o'clock. And they can come and go as they need to ask questions, meet with different people who will be here. We hope to have all the different agencies represented here, all the different departments of the city represented to answer those questions and provide information.
Right. So it's not a sales job on island annexation.
No.
It's an open house where you can get an informal way to get your questions answered. So if you're concerned about this issue, if you live in a area that may be annexed, please join us on January 29th and get specific questions answered. Yes, Councilmember Patton.
I have a question, Madam Mayor, about how do people know that they're in an island or not?
That's an excellent question.
And how are we reaching out to them?
We will, I don't know if we've identified it exactly, Mike. Will we send notices to them? I
Yes.
think that's what we'll do. We've done that in the past, so we know who they are.
Yeah, we'll be providing with those areas that have been identified in past, city council meetings as potential areas for island annexation. We will be notifying both property owners as well as tenants of the upcoming meeting on the 29th. And continuing to update them, throughout the process as future meetings come. I think our next phase. This is really in response, I think, in large part to the last city council discussion on this matter, where there was really a need, I think, to help identify, provide a venue to answer questions that people have, provide more information on what does annexation entail. What does it mean to these folks? After this forum, then we would look to, I think, come back to the city council with the information that we receive, that we disseminate at this meeting, but also to get clear council direction as to whether or not to proceed with the island annexation process.
Great.
So that would be the next logical follow-up step.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time on that. And with that, we will adjourn to the next regular council meeting to be held on January 22nd, 6 o'clock closed session, 7 o'clock regular session still. And with that, I wish you good night. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I said what I said.
What about
the league and the.
Oh, no. I was really torn on that because I kind of wanted to, but, looking at.
You must not have eaten any.